Okay, hello. We're ready to push some paint around. My name is Kelly Folsom, and this is my third video, hoping to do 12 videos, one a month, complimentary for anyone who's interested in learning how I in particular paint. So I had some requests to do something that had pattern on it, like a patterned vase or fabric or something like that. So I decided I would paint one of my favorite blue and white vases. It kind of looks like a Delft blue vase, or maybe similar to like Flow blue or something. So that is what this video is about. Just to save time, to remind you, I'm trying to keep these to between 20 to 30 minutes long, so I've really got to kind of maximize my time here. I've already got the background painted in for you, and I will list the colors that I used for that, and also the variation in the color going from the dark side to the light side. I've also just thrown in a couple of oranges here, just for nice complementary color to the blue. And it'll give us a really pretty reflected light as well, hopefully, if I get time to get to that. So this is something that does tend to throw people off, I guess. With the patterned vases, it can seem like, you know, how to begin, and you have white and blue kind of, or, you know, whatever the colors may be, sort of interlaced, you know, between one another. And the way I approach it, I think is pretty simple and can save a lot of confusion, or mostly can save a lot of headache of trying to kind of paint in the lines. So I always kind of paint from the largest, simplest statement down to just refining more and more particular. So how I've set the scene up already is with that in mind. As you see, everything is just a simple shape. I don't have any pattern put on as of yet, and I would never do that. I would never put any pattern on there to begin with. So first I want to see each unit, every shape in the composition, as a distinct shape. And for instance, these two oranges are pretty much just like one, I basically see it as one mass, you know, one mass in the painting. I don't really see them as being too separated. But I figure I'll kind of get a little warmed up here before I go into the vase. It's kind of a good idea whenever you're painting to, you know, start with something, take your time to start with something simple. I probably spent, since I do try to limit my time investment on these videos, I did probably spend about 10% of the time that I will put into actually painting this, or, you know, maybe even a little bit more. But as a rule of thumb, you want to spend at least, you know, a good 10% of your time getting your drawing, so to speak, set up, your basically your placement of your shapes and your proportions and all that. And I generally turn this upside down too whenever I'm doing that, because a lot of us, me in particular, myself in particular, I have a tendency to maybe maybe make one side larger than another, you know, and I really can't see it. It's really difficult for me to see when I've done that. But as soon as I turn it really to any other side, but I just usually put it upside down. You can use a mirror, but I found the mirror, I used to try to do that, and I found the mirror highly addictive, and to where I could not stop after every brushstroke looking in the mirror, and it was just kind of maddening. So you turn it upside down, and that'll show you kind of any flaws where you're missing symmetry. Okay, so I just wanted to get an overall good shape, and it's not even all that specific exact to the shape. vase itself. So, but I'm just trying to start with the simplest statement, because from there I can always kind of fine tune it. So you want to get warmed up with some simple stuff. You know, you wouldn't want to go straight in for the most complex, most detailed thing that you have to paint. So I did the background stuff first, and then actually I'll go in, maybe put in a little tabletop color here, just to get some light floated onto this tabletop, a little more solid paint. If all the top planes are lights, I'm working with natural light, and lights coming from above, top left, through the window. And so all of my top planes are just going to be washed in light. And so a lot of times people do kind of forget about that whenever they get down to whatever the surface is that their object is sitting on. And as you can see, I kind of just still left some of that, you know, orange color. And I'm really just kind of losing, not worrying about if the paint gets somewhere where it's not supposed to be. I can always make things tighter if I need to, but I really just despise starting off really tight right away. You just kind of want to lay the paint down sort of where it wants to go. On any given day, that can change, you know, how much caffeine have you had, or that sort of thing, you know, how shaky you are, or if you're nervous or something like that. So just like I broke down these oranges into a simple pattern of light and shadow, one lit plane, say maybe 2/3 of the plane in light and 1/3 in shadow, I want to see the vase in the same way. And that's kind of one of the parts where people get a little lost, because the vase can kind of fool you with all that pattern on it. Okay, so now I don't know if you noticed or not, but when we first started out, you know, these oranges just being in black and white and just those two simple shapes, and the mass and color was just raw umber. That's all on that. But I don't know if you noticed, but they felt a lot smaller before they got color on them. So that's one thing you do want to keep in mind whenever you are putting in your objects, is that when you're putting them in monochrome, you know, they're going to look like they're maybe too small on the canvas. And so just knowing that they will feel larger once you get some color on there, and especially anything that has more visual detail, in this case the pattern. So the object is going to feel like it gets larger and larger and larger as you go. Okay, so when you have something that's patterned, two-toned, you know, two different colors, two different values, in this case one is a lighter neutral, and then one is sort of a deeper blue. What you want to do is kind of determine, is there areas of the vase, well, first is define this light and shadow pattern. In this case, again, it's just going to be very similar to what I just did on the oranges. You know, your light and shadow patterns are going to stay consistent as far as what portion of them, of the form, is in shadow and what portion is in light. If you start to change that up as you go, then you lose continuity or consistency. And you know, it's one thing about nature, I guess, is that it's, you know, there is a consistency to it. So if you start to break that down, things start to maybe not make so much sense. It's the same thing, you know, if you decide on a certain color of the light, whether it's a cool light, cool tone light, or a warm light, or, you know, really no temperature at all, whatever your choice is, if you start to change the color of your light around, say like on on one object you put a lot of yellow in the highlight. The next object you put a lot of blue in the highlight. Basically it's just starting to weaken your visual statement, and that has very little to do with exactly painting what you're seeing. It's more just kind of setting up like a visual code, so to speak. This color equals this type of paint equals that, and then you're just trying to kind of hold to that code throughout the working process. Even the thickness and thinness of the paint, by keeping thinner paint, somewhat thinner paint in the shadows and thicker impasto paint in the lights. If I were to start putting, thick paint also in the shadows, but maybe just on one object here, one object there, again, that visual code would just start to break down. Just trying to get a hint already of that reflected light that's going to be happening in the vase. All right, so now we have just a simple shape. I'll make this side, these sides all more symmetrical as we work. But looking to see, okay, light extends all the way across the shoulders, just like it does on these oranges. And you want to make sure you're putting down good paint, especially in the beginning. The paint is going to set up a bit more as you're working, so you do want to deposit enough paint. A lot of times I think people are trying to get too much control immediately, and you'll gain more control too the longer you work with oil paint. But I think control comes more with, or it's really not control, it's really just kind of managing, managing what the paint inherently can or can't do. So in that can also depend on all the types of materials that you're using, so on and so forth. So, all right, so most of the pattern down in this area is all in the blue family. So I can start to kind of loosely just mass in. Mass in some of this blue as I see fit, and I mean, for one thing, I'm kind of racing the clock here, so I do tend to paint a little broader, I guess you might say, whenever I'm doing a demo, or like one of these videos or something. I will perhaps paint a little more loosely or quickly, really just more quickly than what I would do on a normal kind of gallery painting or something, just something that I know I have a lot more time to work on. And then also that kind of deeper blue shows up here underneath the rim. And this blue, I'm working, I'll put the colors as well, but I am working with cobalt once I go into this pattern. But I also want to warm up the blue a bit whenever it goes into shadow. There's kind of a mix of blues actually on this pattern, so I'm going to be kind of switching back and forth between, I think, cobalt and ultramarine, just to get the ultramarine. It's a very red, kind of red-based blue. So, all right. So the majority of those areas are in the blue family. And then, once we reach about, say, this zone, the blue starts to get a little lighter. So again, light coming from top left, light's hitting all these top planes first, and then it kind of washes down the form. And also any planes like here that are coming out and catching the light, and then the form kind of turns in here and away from us, and then it starts to pop back out again. And I'll kind of down here try to show that quickly with a little hit of So where the highlight's going to be down here. And so the highlights too can kind of show you where the plane is kicking out and catching more light. Now as also the blue, there's like a little lighter blue here, and it's getting a little more light as it's coming out from underneath that underplane. Okay. Okay. So now I have, you know, pretty much where the majority of the blue is. Let's see, one area might be like here, there's a piece of the pattern that's kind of curling up with the form. And, you know, if the pattern is kind of going with the form like that, use that to your advantage, because it can make kind of describing the form a whole lot easier. Less, I guess, I don't know if that would be the right way, but like here, you know, so this side curves with this side of the vase, this side curves with this side. And, you know, I don't really worry about putting any of the blue or whatnot, maybe where I, you know, or overlapping where the white is, because I actually want in the end these colors to sort of combine, you know. So a lot of times when people try to really be meticulous and draw the pattern in detail, I mean, of course, if that's your thing, you can do that. But a lot of times what happens is it winds up looking really static and just kind of stuck on, or kind of glued or pasted on. And so you want to, my priority is always to look for light. How is light interacting or falling across this form? That is always my number one priority. And I feel like, well, maybe two things. Like one is how is light moving through the painting and across the forms, and also make your paint beautiful. That's, you know, my kind of number two, or my, they're both my number one, really, my primary concerns. So now, and also now we, just with the white of the canvas underneath, there is, you know, we have the basic value structure as well. However, you know, we need some solid paint on there. And I'm just using the colors that are in the setup, complementary colors, blue and orange, to get this kind of neutral color that's underneath. And I will say I do have some objects that are mostly the neutral color with a little bit of the pattern on it. In this case, in this base, a lot of the base is pattern with a little less of the undercolor. One thing I'll say about the undercolor is, you know, of course, you don't, usually it's never straight white. If you look at the highlight is generally a little bit lighter, depending on the temperature of your light source. In this case, a little cooler. So you want to keep that in mind too. And I think a good way to get, you know, sort of a colorful neutral, a little bit more color-filled neutral, I guess you could say, is by using those complementary colors. And you just want to determine, like some pots that I have or some bases that I have are more of a warm white, some are more of a cool white. So you also want to try to pinpoint what the temperature of that neutral is. And so if you can also put it in terms of a specific hue, like this is a blue white, or this is a blue green white. Some of these bases too go very blue green, like a lot of the blue bleeds into the actual color. You just want to keep adding paint to your pile while you're doing this. While you're adding, you know, this paint, be sure to keep if your pile of paint in the lights looks nice and thick on your palette, then your paint is going to look nice and thick on your painting. But if you're getting a little too vigorous, or maybe mixing a little too vigorously, or maybe not using enough paint whenever you're mixing, then what can happen is you're just not going to be able to pick up enough paint on the tip of your brush to really put down a good amount of paint. This is one of the key areas I think of struggle for students sometimes, is just knowing, how to load your brush, how much paint you want to put on it, when you should stop moving your brush around the canvas and reload paint. You might make 2 or 3 brush strokes and then say, okay, it's time to reload, because the more you move around a brush without paint, really paint on the tip, like now at this point, the more I would move that around, the more I would just start to take paint off of the canvas. And eventually your piles will start to get thinner and thinner in the lights. Now, this doesn't matter quite so much whenever you're working in the shadows, because you naturally want your paint a little thinner in the shadows or in the background. So it's not as, and usually you're using a bit more medium back there, so it's not as, I don't know what the word is, necessary, important, searching for the word, as whenever you go to work in the lights. So in painting, really always just keep in mind that it's all about relationships. And when you're setting up sort of this code of visual relationships, it's the things that have more, more color, more paint, more value contrast, more harder edges. Harder edge comes forward instead of a soft edge usually. So unless, of course you can always flip it and try to do the reverse of these things, because the eye is just always wanting to kind of focus on, the things that are similar, and focus on the things that are different, and sort of tie together the things that are kind of so similar that they become one unit. Okay, so there is some white undercolor in the shadow side as well. You just want to make sure that this is not the same color that you put anywhere in the lights. It needs to feel a little bit more transparent. In this case, I'm using something fairly akin to what's in my background, but I'm just kind of warming it up a little bit more with a little more sienna. I think this is raw sienna red shade. It's really a nice color. It's, not totally transparent, but enough. Again, it's just in relationship to the light. So, okay, so this is the last segment. Talk about speed painting. Let's see what we can do here to try to resolve this a little bit more. And you have some symmetry issues to work out, just taking a step back, looking at the painting from a little bit more of a distance. I just noticed that need to see if I can get this a little more symmetrical. There's only, so much you can do in a 30-minute painting, but I'll do the best I can to get this to look as good as I can. Background color can be really useful to shape things up a bit more, carve out a shape. There's also this is really at eye level, and actually the top of the vase goes, quite a bit above my eye level here. So let's see if I can try to get some of the perspective of that. And we need another, see if you can figure out where these highlights line up to. They don't line up sort of in a straight shot. And then the rim also has a beautiful bit of light on it too. It's not, the underneath goes that dark blue, but I'm going to build some light up on top of this top rim that's catching. Again, it's a top plane, so we want to stay consistent with that, trying to get all those top planes consistently lit up. There's also kind of some fluting on this base, which I'm trying to get in a little bit of. Or suggest. More of a suggestion than anything at this point. But just getting comfortable with moving that paint around off your brush and actually just trying to describe something. Analyzing, okay, does it need to be a darker value? Asking yourself, is that color in shadow? Does that color belong to the light? So if so, how do I change the quality of the paint to suit that? Or change the color or the mixture to suit that? Also watch out, I think, going too many strokes just straight up and down the form. That usually tends to flatten out the form pretty quick. There's kind of some little pieces of the undercolor up in there. So kind of like cross contour drawing, you want to, you can also use your strokes, your paintbrush strokes, almost like a cross contour hatching. To further help, describe the form a bit more. I'm just gonna get that a little more blended, and then because the top of the whole thing goes above my eye level, I need to get the sensation that this is kind of top plane, and that it's almost like overlapping the neck at this point. I need to make sure that I have this all a bit more symmetrical. Now any color that's approaching the highlight, what's really fun is if you want to get a stronger sense of light, you can wash out, that blue just a bit more as it gets closer to the highlight. And then as it trickles down and away, again, drop the value. So the highlight is kind of in the area up here where that is sort of the most intense light, where the highlight is. And to try to further get the sense of that intensity, light one of the qualities of light is that it tends to kind of bleach out the local color. So if you want to get a stronger intensity to your light, think about doing that. Can you lose some more local color around the highlight? Just kind of using some of my straight background color for some of this underneath color, trying to work the two. So I really like just working the two back and forth as far as the pattern goes. Try to keep that paint fresh. And I would also suggest, just trying not to be afraid of the paint or afraid of making a mistake. That's kind of a big part of it, just if you don't let loose to see what it can do. And there's so many things, so many beautiful things that actually happen from letting things kind of overlap, colors overlap, There's different things that just looks that you can't get with glazing, and vice versa. There's looks to this that you can't get with, or if you like the effects of more finished kind of glazing looks and all that, I think you have to kind of pick what you want it to look like. You want it to look more fresh and painterly, then you have to kind of let go and let the paint kind of breathe. I got really lucky the first time I actually used paint, that oil paint. I was using acrylics for a long time. The first time I used oil paint, I just fell in love with it. It was so amazing. And that was one of the qualities that I really loved, was just how juicy it is and how easy it is to move it around or scrape it up and put it somewhere else. So, okay, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Then there we have a, hopefully helpful demonstration. Let's get a little more of that orange, a hint of it up here, on painting a two-toned object, patterned object. From there, just be further refinements, whatever I decided to emphasize a little bit more, or get a little bit more refinement.